My name is Thinh Nguyenphu. I'm the chair for the Evolution Ecosystem Working Group, and my vice chair is Julian Mentos. We'll go over the overview of our working groups and some detail of some of the work item. The term of reference or the charter of our working group is very simple. Two parts. The first part is continue to looking forwards of different topics, technologies, topics, to further advance our NFV architecture and ecosystem. At the same time, we recognize that we are not just working inside a vacuum. We have to continue to work with other industry forums and SDOs to further collaborate, because we don't just invent things just ourselves in this organization, but we have to leverage other SDOs and other industries to help us to further advance ecosystem of NFV. So those are working principle or the charter within our working group. Very simple. To achieve the forward-looking, the method we use is to looking at different topics, study the use case, and the result of that study of those use cases, we may make some series of different recommendations for ISG to consider for our NFV architectures or our ecosystem. We look at that from outside in also. We facilitate with research and school communities. We're also looking at from different SDOs that they have different use cases that we didn't consider phase one. So those type of area advance us to be supporting for the NFV. Now, the other parts of our work involve the industry collaborations and SDOs. That part's also very important, because it's not just that we are producing some normative or informative specifications, but be able to leverage out other SDOs or industries to already develop certain piece of our capability that we require, so that way we don't reinvent the wheel. And further, it helps us further collaborate with them, so that way our capabilities or features that we need be able to deliver on time. So it's very important for us to also to collaborate, learn their timeline, so that way we can coordinate among ourselves to be much more efficient organization to meet the industry deployment timeline. So from that, we create 6 different work items. I will go through all of them one by one very quickly, but here you can see just very broad scope. We cover things like virtualization technology, hypervisors. We're looking at Metro Ethernet Forum. It's another organization that developing for Pacific Carrier Ethernet service. How does that apply to us, and vice versa. And also we're looking at software-defined network, SDN. So all of those type of topics and industry engagements composed for our working. So the first one, Hypervisor EVE001. It's a normative work. We're going to develop a specification to define requirements. The area that I circle here in red are the areas within the scope of this work. So the interface between, or the reference point between the hypervisors and the compute domain, there will be some requirements defined for that area. The other part of the area is between the hypervisors and the VIM. That's another area that we will be developing some requirements to support that. Now, in addition to that, we also have to looking at further thinking, as we're developing hypervisor technology continue to evolve. So we have to look at requirements for new state-of-art technology, and also incorporate some of the work that done in IFA 3 especially the acceleration parts that they developing, how's that acceleration's requirements, specification, and benchmark need to drive the hypervisor requirements. So that's the scope of this one. And our rapporteur is Valerie Young. Next work item is a good example of both the collaborations and looking at other use cases beyond just what we originally thought, right? So here is a Metro Ethernet Forum Carrier Ethernet service. So we had to collaborate with them and looking at both directions from Metro Ethernet Forum and ETSI NFV. So how do they apply their solutions with NFV? And at the same time, how can we support their requirements? So from their results, from this result, we're able to identify common area interest. The third area is another area that we're going to produce as a report. And this report is a series of different guidelines and recommendations for NFVI nodes. The area here is focused only on the hardware resource, the physical hardware resource of NFVI, compute hardware, storage, and networking hardware. But within that, we have to look into, the detail, which is the rack, the processor, the power, the cooling to build the NFVI. So those are a series of different recommendations and guidelines. And the work of those, for this group, we're also looking at the open compute projects also. The fourth work item that we have in our plate is to look at virtualization technology. We have varieties and they're constantly evolving. So here, we're not just looking at the OS container, different type of hypervisors, but how each of these type of technology are mixed and nested together and providing some analysis and recommendations and guidelines. The fifth work item that we have is on software-defined network, or SDN. Again, here is we take the ITU layers concept and we map into ETSI NFV for different varieties of layers and documents what are the impact and make recommendations for further advance our architectures and support for SDN. We're also looking at different design patterns for SDN. And from the result of that study, we generate different recommendations. And then finally, the work item number 6. The work item number 6 is what we call an MI, or miscellaneous item. But it's very important to ETSI NFV because mentioned earlier, it is not just because we want to work inside a vacuum. We want to engage with all different industry forum, industry standard bodies, and leveraging out what's already exists. Okay? So there's two parts. From NSC point of view, ISG NFV or ETSI NFV, you can look at it from two different perspectives. Okay, so the first perspective is looking at from a user body, external body. So those are user external body, they were looking at us as an NFV enabler to advance their solutions. Okay, so we will produce and support, providing NFV solutions. They will looking at as an enabler. At the same time, we also have to interact what we call the upstream external bodies. Those are industry bodies or standards or open source or activities that we can use to apply to build NFV solutions. All right. So now you got two different type of industry bodies. Now, some industry body or external industries, they can be playing as two roles. So we have to deal with each of those industry external body case by case. But on the right-hand side, you can see we already have outreach to varieties of different SDOs and an industry forum through varieties of different ETSI mechanisms, such as MOU, partnerships, cooperative agreements, letter of intent, or liaison exchange. So we have some mechanism already in place and reach out to all these different SDOs, industry forum, and beginning to identify their roadmap and try to feed that roadmap into our internal discussion so we know when and what we need to produce. At the same time, how we can influence those external bodies to support our requirements and our capabilities. So that's the color code here represent a grouping. Like, for example, the greens is all the green, like ADIS, IEEEs, ITU, Metro Ethernet Forum, NGMN, OASIS. Those are already established by us through MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. The 3GPP, of course, that's the partnerships. That's the only one we have, so it's an orange. But you can see different grouping. And some of them are still work in progress. So that's why I did not group them, but you can see also some area like we work through as a cooperative agreement or MOU, but that's still to be determined. My presentation is really short and sweet, and it's, to me, I think it's somewhat important because it's two parts. One is the most important part is the industry engagement, to be able to leverage the other SDOs and the other endpoints. Okay, the endpoint here that's I talk about is the user and the upstreams. They all also play a very important role to our NFV ecosystem. So we need to continue to outreach to those organizations and feedback to them. The second thing is important, but we have to also, as an organization, to make sure that we're delivering what we promised to delivering so that the end user be able to use it as enablers. And at the same time, we need to be able to influence the upstreams of what our needs are so that we can need to generate our own requirements, and depending on different working groups from security, IFA, to REL, may generate a series of different requirements that we can drive the industry through difference. So that's the missions of this working group, try to facilitating, right? But the end point here also is each individual working group has to produce specific requirements so that we can facilitate those needs. Okay?
Thank you, Tim.